Good morning to everybody. Is everybody awake and ready to hear about our jail diversion program that we have out of Harris County? Raise your hand if you are. There you go. Oh my gosh, y'all are awake. I am so impressed. So what a great conference and summit we're having by the Judicial Commission here. I'm Denise Oncken, as Judge Speech just said. I'm going to kick it off and then I'm going to turn it over to Wayne Young and Kim Ogg. Kim's my boss, our DA out of Harris County, Houston. So let me just say a couple of words about the Judge Ed Emmett Mental Health Diversion Center. It's these two individuals sitting here at the table that really got this whole thing going. So you're hearing from top of the pop. But we have a lot of other people here in the audience who are part of that. And so raise your hands, come on. Anybody else from Harris County? You guys are there? Yep, I see you walking in. So thank you all. It takes a village really to make the whole thing spin. But these are the two brain trusts here who put it together and really made it work. So I'm gonna let me just say that they did fix the formatting. The formatting on the email that you guys got with the handout, that's all correct. So we had a little bit of formatting because they changed the format a little bit, but I think all the slides are fixed. So I'm going to turn it over to Wayne. Let me just say we have a lot of calls from a ton of people about how this works. Many of you have been from your jurisdictions to take a look at it, have asked us a lot of questions. We've got 45 minutes, so I'm going to turn it over and let's run. Wayne, you're up.
I will tell you, it's a little bit of a dicey proposition over here. If the DA gives me a little bit of a nudge, I'm going off the edge, that's for sure. So good morning. It is. It's a tight fit there. My name is Wayne Young. I'm the CEO for the Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD, and I'm going to come up and talk a little bit more about the Diversion Center. I thought it appropriate for those who aren't familiar for us to make sure. But that's okay. The Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD, I'm sure he'll get that fixed in just a second. There it went. So there we go. Thank you, Judge. Appreciate it. So we serve a lot of people. That's the short version of this. 80% of the people we serve have household incomes at or below the federal poverty level. We have 76 care locations across Harris County. About half of those are school-based locations with a team of 2,400 team members. 30% of our services are delivered where people live, work, and go to school. And I think what's important to think about is, as we talk about the Diversion Center, we're going to talk about those two elements in gold. The rest of this, which is hard to see because the formatting, is the services we operate around the continuum of care for justice-involved persons. And I say this because I don't think, and I'm relatively new to Harris County. I showed up 23 months ago and had the opportunity to just kind of jump right into this. But people have spent literally decades building relationships between the criminal justice system and the mental health system in Harris County. And so I think what's important is this is in context, and trying to do something like this requires a little bit of relationship building and trust building. It's not like I just showed up one day in Mike's door at the sheriff's office and said, hey, let's go do this thing. It was a lot of history and relationship building. And I'll turn it over to DA to talk a little bit more about how we and why we created the Diversion Center.
Thank you, Wayne. We're doing a little swap out. It'll keep everybody awake this morning. Good morning. I'm Kim Ogg. I'm the Harris County DA. Our mission is to make our community safer through evidence-based prosecution and equal justice for all. This means guaranteeing a fair process for the accused, for the victim, and for the community in every single case. I will tell you that I ran on a platform of criminal justice reform, which is a term of art, not a term of law. So it can mean different things to different people. And let me suggest that my thoughts on criminal justice reform were that we had a lot of people at the low end of the system, low risk, heavy volume offenders in crimes that our public wasn't really bent out of shape about. They didn't want the nuisance, but they also didn't want our jail full of these folks, and they didn't want us necessarily sending people to the penitentiary for low-level, low-risk crimes. So when I thought about criminal justice reform, it was in terms of making our resources, which are limited. We live in a time where government has limited resources. You know, we are not we can be Big Brother, but in truth, government is struggling to keep up with the needs of our population, with the needs of the current times, et cetera. And mental health is at the forefront in Texas because of lack of funding at a state level. And so we've seen a major intersection between mental health and criminal justice. And this was a place that I thought we could perhaps do some real good. The notion would be then that that leaves more resources for law enforcement to handle the types of subject matter that really bother our public: rape, robbery, murder, fraud. Now, mental health is what I would call an emerging practice area in criminal justice. Not that we haven't dealt with people who were mentally ill for a long time. We have. But I'm not sure that we've done it in the smartest way possible. And so our Harris County Jail was the largest, and still is the largest, mental health facility in Texas. That's what it's known as. And the goal here in terms of criminal justice reform when it came to mental health was to affect that directly. We have other diversion programs. We started with misdemeanor marijuana diversion. That was about 10,000 people a year. That's 10,000 fewer going through our criminal justice system each year. That was a significant start, giving officers, we hoped, that 4-hour arrest time to stay on the street. And we had other programs. Drug policy changes included changes to our trace case policy. We stopped filing trace cases. We started diverting possession of controlled substance up to 1 gram, then up to 4 grams. You can see where this is going. There's a theme. As Senator Whitmire calls it, the offenders that we're mad at, not necessarily afraid of. And I felt that it was important to look where we were spending a lot of our money and what we were getting for it. And what we were doing, it seemed to me that the public was saying, we're making things worse for some of these folks. We're making a bad situation even harder. Let's work with them. Let's try to change their behavior without limiting their opportunities for housing, education, good jobs. We have other diversion programs, which you can see, but the idea again was to clear our plate so that we could get to the serious crimes and use our law enforcement resources at the high-risk end. All right, big button. Can somebody change it for me? All right, so when I got to the DA's office as the elected DA, Denise Oncken was running the mental health division. Let me say, this was not an easy assignment. This was an emerging practice area for criminal law. We hadn't had mental health courts. We hadn't had judges that were necessarily attuned to it. And I thought it was too small. We knew that about 1/4 of our jail population was on psychotropic drugs of some sort at some level. And it seemed to me that Ms. Oncken would be better serving our community as a bureau chief. And so one of the things we did was expand mental health prosecution, our interaction together, law enforcement's ultimate interaction with the mentally ill, into a bureau. Now, at the time, we had the Neuropsych Center. We had a problem. We could see that we were booking about 4,500 people into jail each year in 2016, the year that preceded my administration, for trespassing alone, 4,500 trespassers. We were filing then about 100,000 cases a year. It's a significant load, 5% virtually, and about 3,800 of those had been identified as being mentally ill. 596 were repeat offenders, and let me tell you, some of those people have come through our jail as many as 60 or 70 times. The cost is astronomical. And more importantly, nobody was getting a lot better. Can you change this? There we go. So, in looking around the country at best practices, I went to Miami. Miami had a robust mental health program led by a local judge there. They had closed a jail. They had significantly decreased their cost in emergency rooms. This looked really appealing. And it was one of the few big cities in America that I had been to where I was not literally stepping over homeless people in various areas of downtown. They seemed to have a good grip, and it was centered around this mental health treatment sort of notion. So the good news about Miami was they existed. The bad news was it had taken them 18 years, according to their local leaders, to pull it together at the level that it was operating. So I came back, I talked to Denise in Houston, and the most remarkable thing to me is the speed with which our diversion center was accomplished. So I want you to be optimistic. This can be done. It takes political will, it does take some capital, and it takes bipartisan agreement. In a divided time, it is critical for local government to work together, for leaders to work together. And that's what we did. We went to Judge Ed Emmett. He had a funding source. It had been obtained by a Republican senator, Joan Huffman. These things to me seemed inconsequential. We had some money. We wanted it used slightly different. It was being used on a population in the jail. We suggested to Judge Emmett, what about using it for these low-level folks who are taking up, space in our jail, not getting better. They get hurt in jail. We get sued for it. We don't make anybody better. It's a lose-lose. And he agreed. And it was done. He hired Wayne Young. We had Denise Oncken, and these are the people who really put this program together. So while it's wonderful to get up here and get the credit, let me say that the real credit belongs to the people who do the daily work. And that's why they're going to take over most of the presentation. We went out and got other partners. We needed law enforcement's buy-in. That was critical. That's not easy. That's a culture that's had one tool for decades, sending people to jail. It's a hammer. It works when it works, and it doesn't when it doesn't. I felt that they needed another tool, another option, and that option was treatment. So we literally took the premise that you're going to arrest people. We understand that property owners, shopkeepers are going to call. They're going to want homeless people. They're going to want trespassers arrested. They're going to want folks urinating in public, not doing that on their property, folks talking to themselves, harassing customers. It feels to the customer like they're being harassed. We had to give police some place to divert people to. It's not enough to tell law enforcement, hey, just stop doing that. What is law enforcement going to tell the public? They're going to tell them the DA won't take the charges, and she's a problem. They're also going to create frustration with the justice system. People only know to call the police when they have a problem. So we had to bring the police in to be part of this partnership. They were the ones who were going to have to make the arrest and then literally unarrest the person when they took them to the diversion center. So we asked Mike Lee at the Sheriff's Department. We asked Wendy Bainbridge over at HPD. I went to the sheriff and the police chief. So it was a collaborative effort. Everyone agreed. That does not mean everybody loves it at every level, but everyone agreed. This is what you should be optimistic about. This is possible. Regardless of your party, regardless of how people have gotten along before, it is inescapable that your communities will have the same problem we had, be wasting the same dollars we are or were, and not be helping the population that you're trying to serve, neither the shopkeeper nor the mentally ill individual. So those were our partners. Change the slide. All right. Wayne and Denise are going to take it from here. Before I sit down, let me say I am the proudest of this program of anything that our administration has accomplished, and it's because of these people. When you get people who really understand what the problem is, see a solution for it, and give them the backing to do it, great things can happen. This can be done in your community. Come see our Mental Health Diversion Center. And Wayne, look forward to hearing the rest of the details from you.
Thank you, DA. I will tell you that looked a little different from my seat. So I started right after Dr. Shanae retired. December 3rd or 4th was my first day. And in February, I had a meeting. The judge's office called and said, we'd like to meet with you. And I did what any good mental health leader in a new county does. I said, absolutely. You just tell me when and I show up. So I walk into his conference room, and there's the judge. And on one side of him is DA Ogg, and on the other side is Sheriff Gonzalez. And I thought, okay. And I still hadn't put it together that they had talked before this meeting. I don't know why I was so naive. So I sit down at the table ready for whatever conversation is to come. Judge Emmett starts with, we really have been talking, and we think that we need to stop arresting people with mental health issues for low-level crimes. And I did what any good mental health leader does, says, I think that's a great idea. And then there was this awkward silence. And at that moment, I began to put together that I was here for a reason, not just to agree with their decision. And so I am forever grateful, because it gave a great opportunity to have a meaningful impact pretty early in my time at the Harris Center. But they did. They were on the same page. And I will tell you, I think we all know that setting up operational programs is a whole lot easier than aligning the political will and the power and the infrastructure to decide that we're going to do something in a community our size. And so I am forever grateful to the DA and the sheriff and our county judge at the time, Judge Emmett, for making this happen. So we did use SB 292. If you recall, it was originally 1185. It started off as $5 million in pilot funds for Harris County, and now it's expanded statewide. We also, from the sheriff's office, they had obtained a grant from SB 13 for $2.5 million. Our in-kind match, as you know, those funds require dollar-for-dollar in-kind match. Harris County Sheriff's Office, Harris County District Attorney's Office, HPD, the Housing Authority, and the Harris Center. So we had a building that was there. And that meeting I mentioned was in February, 3 months after I got there. And I will tell you that we opened and diverted our first client on September the 4th. Of that same year. So it was about a 7-month window to make that happen. The Judge Emmett Mental Health Diversion Center is a pre-charge diversion location. So that at its core, we are trying to divert people before they ever make it to the jail. It's not after booking. It's not anywhere in that process. Our goal is for them to never be there. And again, September 4th was when we kicked off. A couple of pictures of it. It is not fancy. It is not huge, but it seems to serve us fairly well. Eligibility. So people who are eligible to go to the diversion center are those who commit low-level nonviolent crimes. Well, for the mental health leaders in the room, I will tell you I have taken a strong position that it's not really our call to decide who should be diverted, right? I mean, we don't have the same public safety responsibility that the DA and the sheriff and the police departments have. We've been involved in those conversations. We've participated in them. But really my position is whoever you divert, our role is to say right this way. Right this way, not to get into the diversion, not to get into the debate of should they be diverted, what are those charges. We've left that to the people who have a primary charge related to public safety. They have to have or appear to have a history of mental illness. I will tell you, this is kind of one of those, right? Like it isn't, we're not documenting their history. We're not pulling them up. The DA's office has access. The intake line has access to people who've received mental health services in the jail historically. And so they use that as a guide. But if the officer says, hey, I feel like this person is exhibiting signs of a mental health issue, even if they weren't on the list, they would be divertible. There's not a huge eligibility check that's happening from the street. They have to be not in an acute crisis. And by that, what we mean is they don't meet the criteria for an emergency detention. We don't want folks who need acute emergency kind of involuntary care at this center. We have a neuropsychiatric center. We have a place for that, although it doesn't have the capacity we would like. We have a means and a resource for those individuals. And so this is for that one level just below that where they don't meet that threshold. They wouldn't be picked up on emergency detention. It has to be voluntary. Now, I will tell you that voluntary looks a lot like in the streets, the officer saying, you've got two choices here. You can go to jail or you can go to this nice place where I think they've got sandwich and coffee and that sort of thing, right? So it's voluntary with a little bit of influence, I would say, probably. But from our perspective, once they get there, we're not doing any kind of involuntary holds. There's no commitment process. None of that part is happening. And it is for adults only. It is not clicking again. Okay, so there is kind of a standardized flow process. So I think this is one of the things that I want to emphasize about this is that my desire is for the first person that engages that client when they come into the center my hope is that it's a peer support specialist. My hope is it's someone with lived experience, because remember, it's voluntary. So the truth is, once that officer drops them off, at any point they can decide to leave. And so for us, it's all about engagement. It's trying to get them to want to stay there. And part of that is creating a better environment than where they were at, right? So Tom, who runs our diversion center, him and his team came up with a great idea. Most days when you walk in, you smell popcorn, right? Because there's something about popcorn that kind of makes people want to stay. It does me too. When I get there, the first thing I want is popcorn. It's some kind of psychological trick there that's happening. But we will reach out. The peer will offer them a cup of coffee. You want a sandwich. Some of them haven't eaten in a long time. Next will be a medical assessment by a registered nurse. We have RNs 24/7. There was lots of debate and discussion about, should we use RNs? Should we use EMTs? I will tell you from my perspective that RNs gives us the ability to take some chances on people that might have a little bit of medical need that would be beyond the scope of what we could probably do safely if we didn't have trained medical folks there. I will also tell you the same thing is true. Our security is provided by the sheriff's office. It's part of the match, and we're really grateful for that. We had a lot of debate about that. Should we have sheriffs? Should they be in uniform? What does that do to people who are a little bit hesitant? I will also tell you that that gives us a lot of comfort in taking chances on people that otherwise we might say they're a little too agitated for us. We know that that the sheriff's deputies that are there have our back, and if something really starts to go kind of badly, they will intervene, and we can get their support and help. And so that person who's kind of pacing with their fists clenched, perhaps using some colorful language, we know we can kind of take them, and if it doesn't work out, we still have a safety way to keep our staff safe and keep going. So the nurse assessment happens. We do have a psychiatrist there 7 days a week. We do not have them 24/7 like we do at our neuropsychiatric center. We also have a primary care. We have an internal medicine doc that's there 7 days a week. Again, not 24/7. It's incredibly important. Now, one of the things that, by the way, if you ever do one of these, I will tell you my experience is everything bad that happens in the first 2 weeks. So everything that you thought, well, that'll never happen, we'll be running a year before that happens. I mean, it's like 3 days and somebody shows up with a fractured ankle, and they were in a wheelchair, so it was easy to miss. It wasn't the officer's fault. It wasn't negligent on their part. There's just lots of challenges that come, and for whatever reason, we were blessed with all those challenges in the first couple of weeks. The other piece is to think about it from the DA's office perspective is when we started doing this, we began to talk about, like, we don't do sobering here. We have a sobering center in Harris County. And so I didn't want to duplicate, right? None of us have enough resources. They do it great. They've been doing it for 10 years. I don't want to get in that mess and mess up what they're doing, and it's a good thing. One of the first 2 weeks, the calls that happened is, hey, we've got this person. The officer called from the street. They called the DA intake line. Hey, we got John Doe. He's trespassing. DA said, well, take him to the diversion center. So off he comes to the diversion center. He gets there. He's intoxicated. We say, look, we don't do intoxicated people. We don't do sobering. The officer called the intake line back and said, hey, the Harris Center won't take them because they're intoxicated. And the DA said, well, we don't divert to the sobering center. We only divert to the diversion center. The sobering center had always been a pre-charge diversion. The officers had just done that without going through the DA's intake line. So, and to their credit, the DA said, look, we're not air traffic control or diversion. Y'all got to figure this out. And so part of this is us owning and taking some responsibility within the systems and the networks that are there of how do we solve this problem. And so we did. We got an MOU with our sobering center, and they do a great job for us. Everyone's also evaluated by a master's level clinician. On-site services, assessments, integrated care planning, medication management, primary care, psychiatry, psychosocial programming, substance use disorder interventions, rehabilitation services. We do have respite beds that are part of it, peer support. We have capacity in our diversion center for 41. We have 12 what I call respite recliners, because if you just say recliners, you get this image of like this kind of crushed velvet lazy boy kind of green thing, and that isn't really what it looks like. I'll see if it's there. No, it's not the next slide. Peer support specialists. We have, in addition to the psychiatrist, the internal medicine doc, we have peer support specialists, we have substance use disorder counselors, we have recovery coaches, we have housing specialists, we have employment specialists. We have a great deal of folks who engage them while they're here, and our intention is, I think when I hit backwards, it messed it up. If you can, there we go. To continue to provide services for individuals after they leave the diversion center. So it's not like, okay, they're here, they're gone, and now they're somebody else's. Our whole goal is to stay engaged with them, to stay in contact with them, and continue to provide support services and these array of things. So we have, we mentioned that Permanent Supportive Housing, our housing authority, gave us 85 vouchers as part of our match for this. And so part of our deal with them was if they're going to use a voucher, if they're going to go on a wait list, then we try and keep them in a bed. Their experience was people are certainly eligible, they're a priority group, but by the time that they could actually find an apartment that was open and available for them, they were kind of lost to follow-up, right? They were back in the streets, they weren't available, they weren't able to connect with them and get them housed. So if they're going into those vouchers, we try and keep them in a bed somewhere in our system, whether it be at the diversion center. Our record holder she did not want to go anywhere else. She wanted to stay there until her apartment came available, so she was there for a while, although most people transitioned to some of our respite beds and those sorts of things. If you want to forward to the next slide for me. There we go. So I'll turn it over to Denise Oncken to talk for a minute.
Thanks.
Good luck with that.
Okay, thanks. So super exciting. And so just so everybody's clear, this is a pre-charge mental health diversion center. That means no criminal charges. They don't go to the jail. There's no booking. It's not post-booking. No criminal charges. Voluntary system, but a little bit of encouragement when the police officers are picking them up. And, I want Major Mike Lee, Sheriff's Department, Mike, stand up. Come on, stand up. Because law enforcement, this is the driving force. Give them a round of applause. Mike helped drive this program along with HPD, and Assistant Chief Bainbridge was here yesterday, but she had to head on back. They're a little busy in Houston. But Mike, along with HPD, and Mike's with the Sheriff's Department, really was the driving force to really make this happen. Because I'm telling you, just as my boss, Kim Ogg, said, if you don't have the buy-in from law enforcement, it doesn't happen. So here's what we did. Our initial focus, as Kim told you, was trespassing. And I will tell you that part of the focus on that was in looking at it, and to give her credit, Kim said, let's study this. Let's look at this a little bit and really figure out what we need to do. She's all about the stats, and let's look at the numbers, and let's figure out what is the right thing to do here. And I will tell you guys, she called me in first day she was in office and said, mental health, top priority. Let's figure out what we need to do. So I can't say enough about a DA who's going to call you in first day and go, mental health, top priority here. So, because there's a lot of stuff going on in Harris County and Houston, if you don't know. But anyway, so what we did is we studied it and we figured out we couldn't transfer these over for civil commitment. And my colleague at the county attorney's office, and I don't know if she's here yet, stand up, Melinda. Stand up in the back. Melinda Brandt, she's retired now, but county attorney's office. Give her a round of applause. Because Melinda told me we have a split jurisdiction in Harris County, and she told me, she said, Denise, y'all are dismissing those criminal cases. You're sending them over here for civil commitment. Don't send them. It's not happening. So it was only out of close to 200, it was only 5 who got civilly committed. So she said, you really need to rethink what you're doing. And so it was really Melinda too, who helped drive me back to figure out what we're going to do. So we expanded we focused on trespassing. And then in May of 2019, about 8 months after we kicked off, we expanded into other low-level misdemeanor offenses. And I will tell you, you got to have a DA, an elected DA like Kim Ogg, who's willing to go out there on the ledge and say, you know what, we're going to expand that. And somebody who can pull law enforcement in to say, yeah, that's what we're going to do. Because law enforcement has had a different take on what they need to do when they encounter someone out there on the scene. So, but Kim said, when we roll this out, I want to make sure that it's, of course, nonviolent crimes, and that we keep in mind public safety, because that's what the public wants. They want to feel safe out there. Yeah, they want to help these individuals. They want to see that they get treatment, but they want to feel safe in their homes and in the community out there. So what we decided is, for those of you who are prosecutors, we have prosecutorial discretion. And so instead of really giving a list of all the crimes that we are going to do it on, we said case-by-case basis. And what we have under Kim is we have a 24/7 intake. She's got a minimum of 5 lawyers sitting there on the phones at intake 24/7, listening to every police officer in our jurisdiction call in and say, hey, I'm out here on the scene, this is what I got. Do I have probable cause and will you accept charges? every single case. So it's easy for us to catch these individuals as the officers were out there on the scene in order to make the division for diversion. So what that meant to us is we not only had to train all of law enforcement, we also had to train a whole bevy of prosecutors in our office as well. So that's kind of a lot to get done in a short amount of time. And Wayne, you're the only one who can make this go forward. So one of the things that Kim said, okay, we need to identify the crimes that are not eligible for diversion. And so these are the misdemeanor offenses, and it's only misdemeanors that were identified as we're not going to divert these individuals. And it's the types of things you would think. DWI, we have a problem with a lot of DWIs in Harris County, if you haven't read about it, and some serious fatalities occurring because of it. Weapon offenses, a big concern. Our assaults, our domestic violence kind of stuff, terroristic threats. Burglary of motor vehicle. That's one of the things that Kim said, you know what, people take, this is Texas, it's Houston, people take their cars very, very seriously. So we will not be diverting on those. So anything where public safety was concerned was of interest. And once again, I cannot get this to forward. There we go. So here's some examples of some of the expanded charges. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm happy to visit with any of the prosecutors who are out there in the audience who want to talk about that. But let me just give like one example. So when they call into our DA intake 24/7, a prosecutor answers the phone and the officer says, you know, I got a trespasser out here, or I got somebody committing criminal mischief. Maybe it's somebody who's out at our metro area where the buses are, and they've kicked in a door. The person is homeless. The person is schizophrenic. We're never going to get any restitution out of them. Metro's got insurance. They're going to get that door fixed. They're schizophrenic. They're not in crisis, but they have a mental health issue. They've been homeless for a long time. That's the kind of person that we need to send to the Mental Health Diversion Center, because even though they might have had other trespass charges or low-level offenses before, they are continuing to commit these types of crimes, and we need to get them some treatment and help. So when we expanded our charges in May of 2019, what Kim did is this. She called all of our law enforcement chiefs in to a breakfast, and luckily Wayne hosted that because he has a big enough facility over at his home office, and we did a presentation to law enforcement. And I will tell you, a lot of the chiefs came in and they said, yeah, I don't really know about expanding this stuff. You know, we did this trespass thing, but I don't know about expanding it. But I'm telling you, after the presentation, after we visited with them, after they heard from Kim and Wayne, they said, I'm in from those police chiefs. And so consequently, a press conference was done so that the community would be aware of what we were doing. And Kim, along with our lead law enforcement agencies, that's Harris County Sheriff's Department with the sheriff, along with the Houston Police Department, the chief of police, and our third largest law enforcement agency, Pasadena PD, all of those police chiefs were up there, along with Wayne and Kim, to say we were going to expand this program. So it was really a beautiful thing, and I will say Wayne's going to talk a lot about the outcomes, but let me just tell you, we have, gosh, I don't even know how many police agencies, 100-ish in Harris County, so it's a lot to bring in. It's not like Kim can call up every chief and say, hey, what are you doing today? So that's why we had to have the breakfast in the meeting. But these over 40 agencies have diverted in the first year to the Mental Health Diversion Center. And you can see the numbers, and I want to give a shout out, Houston Police Department, you can see over 1,000 individuals they diverted over there. But it takes all these police agencies. You can see some of our college campuses diverting as well. So it really does take a village to make this happen. I'm going to turn it back over to Wayne. He's going to talk about some great outcomes. Wayne?
All right. So I will tell you, we're doing a full outcome evaluation right now. We've got a third party in partnership with one of the universities to really look and do an external evaluation. I think it's always important to have people who don't have any skin in the game look at the numbers and kind of tell you where it's at. So I've been referring to these as kind of early outcomes or early impact because some of them probably aren't even outcomes, truthfully. A little bit about who we serve. 80% are males. 86% came through the DA intake line. What that means, though, is that some of them came from other sources, primarily police diverting without even calling the DA intake line. 94% were Class B. B misdemeanors. We had 4%, which were Class Cs, which again is probably just the diversion because they don't call the intake line for Class Cs. And then a few As, and when you look at the As, they all kind of make sense. Homeless, 65% of the folks say that they're homeless. 20% say they're unknown. I don't think it's that unknown. I think they're not. I think they're pretty well known as homeless, but they got insulted or didn't want to respond that they were homeless, and so we don't push it. We don't validate these things. We just ask them the question. About 60% African American, 12% Hispanic, 23% Caucasian. Length of stay. So you can see about 50% less than 6 hours. And I can't read those numbers, but it's in the slide. They're going to put it online so you can see it from here. 15% more than 72 hours, 13% 24 to 72. We'll go to the next slide. Whoop. Thank you. So interestingly enough, of all the people that have been in the diversion center, only about 2/3 of them have a history of prior bookings. But in that group of 2/3, they have averaged 8.5 bookings per person. With an average of 275 days in jail in their lifetime for a total of 220,000 days that these people have spent in jail. Now, some of those charges might have been more serious than trespassing, right? I'm not saying that those were all misdemeanor days in jail, but it's pretty significant. Also, interestingly enough, one of the things that we've just kind of discovered is that a lot of these individuals, 40% of them have Medicaid or Medicare. And so we're trying to figure out what that means and what the implication of that is. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're homeless, but I would have probably bet some money that they wouldn't have access to any benefits. But they do. People have been engaging them. People have been trying to get them into services and supports. And then you can see there's about 8% with private insurance. So almost half of the folks have some sort of coverage. I can assure you that a covered benefit is not jail diversion center, but it is there. So this is an interesting look and probably more meaningful for those who are in similar roles to me. But prior to the left of the red line representing when we opened the diversion center, prior to that, it's the number of people who were booked into the Harris County Jail who had a history at the Harris Center. So may not be recent, may not have been yesterday, might have been 2 years ago, whatever, and then you can see the drop. And I use this to portray the fact that what we're doing is we are targeting the people who have serious mental illness, right? We're making an impact in the people that I treat and care about's experience and overlap in the criminal justice system. All total, 1,795 diversions in the first year. And remember, we started on September 4th and not the 1st because there's a holiday that weekend. And I will tell you, it has bothered me ever since because I'm sure if we had opened on September 1st, we would have had over 1,800. And so 1,795 doesn't sound nearly as good as over 1,800. Our average length of stay is 53.8 hours. The average drop-off time for law enforcement is 11 minutes. Now, I will tell you, law enforcement, and some of them have said, like, if it's your first time and you're not in a big hurry, 11 minutes, on average, the typical officer who's dropped somebody off before can be out in like 3 to 4 minutes. It really is not a long thing. There's a little computerized form that they fill out that basically feeds the information into our database. And the only information we ask them to put in is the information they told us they would want back out. I knew I would have all the healthcare documentation. I didn't know what information that the law enforcement agencies would want to know back from us. And so they created the form. Our longest stay is 80 days. That's the young lady who didn't want to leave and waited for an apartment. 53% have not had any new jail bookings after the first diversion. 53% have received mental health services after their diversion. 15% reduction in overall booking. Projected year one savings is $9.2 million. Projected year two savings is $10.7 million. That's just criminal justice system cost. That has nothing to do with hospital district, emergency room. That is DA time, judge's time, the cost of actually housing them in the jail and all the expense associated with that. There is, so one of the slides way back showed the number of people who waited in jail for thousands of days for competency restoration. And so we have virtually nobody on misdemeanors waiting for competency restoration anymore. And so that does include some competency restoration time, which is not direct community savings, although some of it is because we pay for some local beds. 38%, so this is post-diversion, so this is where they access care after they left. Those categories are not discrete, they're overlapping. 136 people have gone into transitional housing. So at the end of the day, if you think about all the different places they might have gone, treatment, respite beds we have, that sort of thing, 18.5% of those who are homeless ended up with a roof over their head when they left the facility. And if we could figure out how to tackle those 11% on the wait list, that would put us at almost a third of the people left our facility with some sort of housing over their head. It may not be permanent. I can't say they're all still in housing, but that's a huge impact for a population. These are really hard to serve folks. These are not people standing on the street corner waving, trying to flag somebody down to come help them, right? These are people who have intentionally avoided systems like ours for a long time. some of the other access to benefits and linkages that we've made for folks. I'm trying to make sure, if you can go to the next one. There's one slide I want to make sure I cover. I know we're running short on time. This is the one. So this shows the number of times, and I will tell you, back home, the thing that killed me over the most back home is, well, they can leave, and sometimes they do leave, and then we have these people who keep coming back, right? They keep coming back to the diversion center. And I try and just carry this slide in my pocket so I can pull it out as a reminder that 90% of the people that have been to the diversion center have only been once or twice. So we talk a lot about the guy on the bottom who's been there 15 times. We talk a lot about him. And it's not inappropriately so, right? Like, we still have to figure it out. We have to figure out how to make it work for him too. But 90% of the people that have been diverted are once or twice. And I will say that the guy who's been there 15 times, in his lifetime, he's been arrested over 80 times for trespassing alone. He's got more than 80 arrests. 80 trespassing arrests. And so my response to my colleagues who are kind of killing me over him is, give me 80 shots at him, right? Like, you had 80 chances. Arresting him the 81st time is not the thing that's going to push this over the edge. I promise you, we don't just need 82 arrests and suddenly he's going to become a model client and do something different. At least now I'm getting an opportunity to impact him. The early data evidence suggests that through the first 8 visits, each stay becomes incrementally longer. And so what that tells me is that over time, we're beginning to get the ability to engage these folks. And I don't know how long it's going to take for number 15 to get there. Everybody in Harris County knows his name. I just can't say it out loud. You've got him in your community too, I promise you, right? And so I don't know, but I'm optimistic that it might not be 80, right? And so we're going to keep working at him. I can't tell you the incredible support the DA Oggs provided to this program and the other folks that have already been recognized, and Denise as well. And so I've already been flashed my sign. There's lots of other information on here about our oversight committee and our outcomes measures and how we came up with that stuff. If you look for it online, it'll be there. But we appreciate your attention, and we appreciate your interest in diverting folks with mental health from the criminal justice system. Thank you.